Okay, let's see. See if we can get anybody in here actually viewing. I'm going to be doing this broadcast every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. ish. A little bit later start today. Nobody's actually in channel now, so I'm kind of talking to myself and talking for the recording. But regardless, if you come on in, you can ask me questions. Today's topic is open forum. I'm kind of waiting for people to actually show up before we really get too in depth on anything. Um, let's see here. Okay. Looking to see if anybody's going to show up. I'm going to put it on the start scene for now till start seeing some people come on in. No viewers so far. Hopefully we'll get that changed. I got some likes on here, so maybe. Yeah. Does say I've got 2 viewers. Who's here? If you're here and viewing, can you give me a shout out so I know you're here? Feel free to say hi. I do show 2 viewers, and it was showing 0 just a couple moments ago, so want to get some feedback. We're starting the RPG College video in the raw again. Video in the raw means that I basically do not edit my videos, you'll get them this way, and then when I move them over to YouTube, they've not been re-edited or anything. The most I got to do is get rid of little tiny snippets that from logging on and off the server. If they're little like under a minute pieces, I'll probably just toss them out instead of transferring them over. But other than that, I don't edit anything. The actual topic today is open forum. It's kind of like how I run my RPG college DM roundtable, except I haven't scheduled any other DMs to come in today. But it is an open forum, so feel free to ask anything you'd like about role-playing games in general, D&D specifically, any edition. I'm familiar with all the official editions, plus a little bit of Pathfinder, being that Pathfinder is mostly 3.5 kind of modified and simplified. So I can answer a lot on Pathfinder 1e anyway. I don't know anything at all about 2e. But in general, about concepts about role-playing games, I'll start as starter topics for until I get questions. I'll mainly be talking about world building for dungeon masters and building backstories for characters, because I always find that to be one of the topics that's constantly being asked about me, or not about me, but about the game itself. I ran a rather successful panel on building character backstories last year at VisionCon, the live VisionCon. Also, feel free to ask more questions about my topics I did this year at the virtual VisionCon, which were building engaging NPCs and the challenge rating system and building encounters, because it is, as a DM, it is more art than science. There's like really not a step-by-step checklist that'll make you a successful DM. You just got to dive in and do it. But I really think most people have it in them to do it. Okay, we're down to one viewer, but I'm still not seeing who's viewing. Nobody's talking in the channel. I do tend to talk rather fast, so if that disturbs you, let me know to slow down, and I'll try to do that. Okay, let's kind of switch pages here so you can see my ugly mug on the host screen. I do have a doc open so that I can keep track of certain questions that I might want to expound on later, and what we've covered. Always a good method to do it. As you can see on the bottom of my screen, there is a scrolling thing that'll tell you about my YouTube channel, if you want to go there. I do try to put these videos up within about a week to 10 days of having aired them here on Twitch, so you can go to YouTube and check them out. I am currently not sufficient. Oh, wait a minute. I need to change one of those search things. Let's see. Have you searching something? And it's misspelled slightly. I want to make sure I fix that misspelling. There's just double E in gamer. Let's go. Yeah. Fix that real quick. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure so that when people try to do search and stuff. Anyway, that bottom scrolling information lets you know about my Patreon page, my YouTube page, both the places that you can go. My Patreon is to help support these videos, and my YouTube channel and just to support, the various things I do. I also go on sometimes into conventions and do live panels, or I'll do virtual panels with the virtual conventions. I have been known to go to local gaming stores and libraries to run panels outside of convention times, like during special events, like International Game Week at the library, or when people ask me to run special workshops. I've been known to do those as well. So this helps support that. Also, my Patreon supports my writing. I am working on a lit RPG or game lit novel right now. And currently, if you become a $10 a month supporter on Patreon, you will get the newest chapters as I finish them on the book. Currently, the prologue is up there for my new project and any other projects I'm working on too, because I might have a world building projects or module design projects, and you'll get to have some insight into that. And like I said, if you're a $10 a month subscriber, then you will get the earliest access of all. Basically, as soon as I finish a chapter, I'm not even necessarily going to edit it. I'm going to throw it up there for people to look at. And it won't go to my $5 a month minimum patrons until the next installment in that individual project goes up. So once chapter 1 goes up of my new lit RPG book, then the prologue will become available to my $5 a month subscribers. I also will take commission type work through my Patreon, and that's described on my Patreon page. It's part of the tier benefits you get. So you can check those out. I am trying to do the RPG College once a week on a regular schedule instead of how I was previously doing it, which was, whenever I had some time and a quiet here at the house, so I didn't have to worry about my girlfriend and her son interrupting me with a lot of noise and everything. I would just go on and run it, which typically meant I would be broadcasting late at night. And I know that's not real convenient for everybody, and not having a schedule definitely doesn't really benefit people who want to try to be there for my more important panels. So I have tried to schedule it now to at least once a week have a regularly scheduled RPG College broadcast. I also regularly schedule 2 game playthroughs. It's called Nostalgia Gaming is the show, where I run through currently Final Fantasy X, although yesterday's show I cut short because I didn't have anybody watching, and I had been sitting up all day. My back was killing me, so I just couldn't handle that a moment longer. Maybe if I'd had people interacting and talking to me. But I try to do that on Mondays and Wednesday nights, seen as the following morning I do not have to be up early in the morning to go to a dialysis treatment. So from 10 to midnight, and I will at times go past midnight or start just a little bit after 10 o'clock, I will try to do my nostalgia gaming. And like I said, right now it's Final Fantasy X. I also could be seen to be playing Dark Cloud 1 or Dark Cloud 2 right now. And sometimes I'll go in and play some old school EverQuest. So any of those are possible. And then as I get other games, I might even stream them as well. Um, but those are my kind of regular schedules. And then on Saturdays and Mondays during my regular D&D games, if everybody's okay with it, I may start streaming some of our Roll20 sessions. We're waiting to make sure we get all the technical difficulties ironed out before we really start trying. And then, of course, I got to get the permission of the other players. Even though they're not on cam, they will be on voice. And so I feel it's only right to get their permission. And I have to make sure that I can get their voices to sync up with my Twitch, too. So that's another thing. Um, anyway, on to the subject matter that I'm going to start with, since I don't have any questions yet. Um, First off, building character backstories. I did a very successful panel on this last year, and I've done this panel a few times. It's good for both my tabletop role-playing game listeners, as well as my fellow writers out there, because learning how to write a backstory for a character can be a really valuable resource. And I'm talking about, quick backstories. So uh, the first thing is your backstory should be no more than no less than, excuse me, no less than a half a page and no more than 2 pages long for this stage. Of course, obviously, if you're writing a book, you're going to end up expanding possibly on the backstory of your characters, either in or out of the open storyline, because you're going to want to know some more of the backstory, even if you never related it to your readers directly, because it's going to help you play the character towards the motivations later in the game. But in a role-playing game setting, you don't want more than 2 pages. I know there's a lot of us writers out there. Our tendency is to want to write a book, but we can't expect our dungeon masters to read Tolstoy, War and Peace, volumes 6 through 9, because of the fact that we just got word vomit on the page. We have to kind of learn to condense it a little bit. And you got to remember that a backstory for a Dungeons and Dragons character is not necessarily the same as a backstory for a novel character. Backstory in a novel character can be quite epic, quite different, because in your novel character, not everything they do that's epic and amazing is in their future in the game. A lot of it is in flashbacks and other related events, so your main character in your book could be an ancient displaced monarch who's got a secret cache of powerful items that they can access to do their bidding. And you're writing backstories for not just the protagonist but the antagonist, and you got to go into different amounts of detail for the different levels of red shirts or whatever that you're writing about. I use red shirts, of course, from Star Trek. In a role-playing game, though, you first off have to remember that the epic adventures of your characters are in their future. The last thing they need to be doing is trying to upstage their past. If they've already done all the fantastic, wonderful, desirable things in the past, what is there to look forward to in the future? If you've already killed a god in your past, how do you top that? You don't. In a novel series, you can eventually get to the point where you're one-upping these amazing one-upping things, but you have to build to it. The lead character doesn't start out um, with the massive Kamehameha wave kind of attacks on entire cities and stuff. You don't do that. You look at a novel like, say, Raymond Feist's Rift War Saga, where the main character's name is Pug. Later on, he goes by the name Malimber, which is a little bit more exotic. And in the beginning of the book, he doesn't even know barely that magic exists. He knows, but just barely. And then he gets apprenticed by the court mage for the Duke of Cridee, and it turns out he has a lot of natural talent in magic, but he can't really do the lesser path magic that the mage is trying to teach him. He doesn't even find out the term lesser path until later in the story. But he starts out with some magic ability, but he almost does it by accident and has very little control over it. Now, later in the book, in the second, third, and especially fourth books of that series, he is doing massive, almost world-ending, world-shattering magics. But he doesn't start that way in the first few chapters of the first book, and definitely not in his backstory. That's not what you want. Now, there's some side characters later on that come into the story that might have more extensive backstories that we may or may not hear about that will allow them to do these fantastic things. But not in the beginning and not the main character. Excuse me. Supporting characters can have massive, epic backstories because that's why they're great support characters. They've gone through and around the block a few dozen times, and then they're imparting their wisdom to the next generation of heroes, as it were. Um, so that's the thing there, and you don't do that in your D&D character. You want your character to have lots of room to move forward and expand outward. So you don't want to draw in the epic things. First thing in your backstory, I should not be reading that you defeated a greater vampire or an elder dragon or destroyed a world. Um, those should not be the opening lines of a backstory. You have to build in lots of room for your DM to work with you to build you a wonderful story. And if you write all the good stuff into your backstory, the DM has nothing to work with too. So we've got 2 rules already for building a backstory. First rule is keep it between a half page and 2 pages. And within that same area, the second rule is remember that all the epicness, all the great deeds of wonder are in the future for your character. You want something to play towards. You want to actually live those scenes, not just remember them. Remembering them is okay, and it's a vicarious glory. But if you're going to be playing a role-playing game where you actually get the chance to put yourself in the active shoes of a hero instead of just reading a book about them, you want to be able to participate in those wild adventures and massive earth-shattering stories. And so you don't want them to all be sitting in the backstory. That means you don't write into your backstory the ownership of a massive magic item that the DM's never going to let you start with anyway. And try to use your backstory to make him. No, it's not going to work. So your character was not handed down a +5 Holy Avenger from his Paladin father, and you're not starting on the road with that Holy Avenger fully attuned to you and you just using it to slay anything and everything in the name of your god. No, that's not gonna be how it works. So those are 2 of the main things. Now, the other thing you want to do when you're writing a backstory is you want to provide some NPCs for the DM to get a hold of. You want something that they can grab onto and use in his storyline, whether it's used in flashbacks or as motivations or what have you. You want to take those NPCs, and you generally want to provide 2 to 3 real NPCs. Now, they can be big or small NPCs. They don't have to be ginormous or you don't need to have the king and the emperor and the god on your Rolodex. That's not how it works. But you could have a merchant that is in your backstory that you've interacted with several times. You bring them up 2 or 3 times throughout the little backstory, and the DM can later on have you meet that merchant again on the road doing a traveling sales through a shop wagon, and that merchant could also end up being a quest giver for you to give you the hook for the next adventure. So in that way, he writes it into the story, and you, as a player, get to see that synergy between your past and your present come alive. That gives the DM. Another thing could be like, of course, a lot of people do the tragic backstories, and nothing wrong with the tragic backstory. It's one of the great motivators to get somebody out there to adventure. And so you do this tragic backstory, and you just say that your entire village was ransacked by, and you might say a band of gnolls did it. Well, you need to come up with a name for the leader of the gnolls, and you can work with your DM to come up with a name because he might have some gnoll chieftain in his back pocket that he can always insert into that role to go along with what you remember. And so, and that's the reason you put him there, because one of your motivators for this character is quite possibly going to be justice and or revenge on said noble captain and his troops. And you can only get revenge on somebody if you know who that somebody is. Now, that's not to say you can't have a mysterious somebody and part of your questing is to figure out who that somebody is. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that NPC is an important NPC to put in because it's going to be in your, hopefully in your character's future. NPCs from their past should come in and knock on their future doors every once in a while, just to make sure you're still paying attention. So you put in 2 or 3 contexts: a mentor, an arch nemesis, a rival. Those kind of things you throw in there, but you keep them within reason. Like, for instance, a rival. Your rival should not be the be all end all of all magic users right off the bat, because you're never going to catch up with them. Not on the D, even not with the D&D leveling system. There's only 20 levels of D&D. If your rival's already level 20, you don't have much to do. You're not going to be able to really catch up to him, because as you're building, he's building. And he's probably going to retire long before you get to 20. Or he's going to go for godhood himself. So you got to be a little careful when you set up a rival. Now, you can set up an idol that you want to work to be just like. That's different. But that's another thing that you do put into your backstory. And then you need to answer certain questions in your backstory. There's generally, I have a list of questions that I ask people anyway. It's a questionnaire. It doesn't always include all of these questions, but it includes versions of them or things that can lead to inspiring you to answer these questions. The main questions that you're going to ask your character, as if you're interviewing him, doing a profile piece for him on, celebrity talk. He's your guest, you're the profiler, and you're going to ask him some questions, and then you're going to come up with some answers to fill in those questions. And so, questions you're going to ask: number one, where did this character come from? Are they from a big city, a small village, a wandering troupe of entertainers, or a nomadic tribe of barbarians? Where are they from? 2, what led them to be wanting to leave their comfortable wherever or uncomfortable wherever to become an adventurer? It's not an easy life. It's a traveler's life. It's not what most people dream of in the medieval times. They kind of wanted to stay put. They wanted safety and security. So you're basically going to be asking what motivated them to become an adventurer. That's an important question. Questions will include, of course, about the NPCs. Who was your character's mentor? Who discovered in them the ability to weave a magic spell or touch the weave itself? Who is their mentor? Who was the guy? Is their mentor alive or dead? There's questions in Xanathar's guide that can help you with some of this too in 5th edition D&D. Like, you're going to ask, do you have relatives? Do you have siblings? How many? Are you the oldest? You the middle? Are you the youngest? You number 5 out of 12? What are you? And so that gives you other contexts. Is family context. Family context may or may not be used, but it does give you more reality to your character. If you come from a family of, let's say, elves that have very few children, so they usually only account for any kind of inheritance or anything for 1, maybe 2 children period in their family, and anything more than that might have to become adventurers just because there's nothing left of the family fortune to pass on to them. Depends on the cultures written in your game. Or if you come from just a huge family, you might become an adventurer just because there's no other way to set yourself apart from your siblings, and they're all feeding at the household larder for most of their life anyway, and you decide to go off and make your own fortune instead of living off of mom and dad. The tragic backstories are in these questions. But yeah, why did you become your profession? Who was your mentor? Um, are you from a big town or city, small village or tribe? These are the kind of questions you ask in order to round out your backstory. Um, what is your goals and motivations? Why are you on the road? I mean, not just what set you on the road, but why are you on the road now? What was that final straw? Are you out to get revenge or justice on the one that destroyed your whole village? Are you looking for a mysterious artifact? Um, have you made it your goal to map the entire known material realm? Are you looking for a rare spell component to cast a magical cure on an ailing relative? What are these things that might motivate you to go out there? Is your kingdom another kingdom at war, and you just naturally got thrown into it as a conscript or soldier, but then your unit got separated from the main army, and now you become more of mercenary adventurer types than an army group? Is that what got you moving towards your goal? Um, and those all touch on backstories. There's a whole lot more I can talk about backstories, but this isn't the backstory show. If we want to do a whole show dedicated to backstories, I can totally do that. I'll get out my notes from my previous panels for it, and we'll go fully in depth on the backstory thing. But it was a great starter thing to just get your mind going, get your nerve synapses firing, so you can decide what questions you do want to ask. And the reason I'm linking it with this next topic is because they are intermingled. The character backstory goes a lot into the world backstory. The world backstory is directly involved with world building. Excuse me, too much soda. World building is a kind of a backstory kind of thing too, because while world building, you develop the underlying motivations and stuff of the world. These are a bit grander. You're not going to be compressing all of this down to a half page to 2 pages, but you can start with that half page to 2 page outline. Uh, there's multiple ways to build a world. You can start with a large overarching concept. Start with the world and work down to the continent, to the kingdom, and then to the village. That's definitely an acceptable way to do it. You can also go the other way. Start with the farmhouse where the characters grew up. Move on to the village that farmhouse is attached to, and then the parish or county or fiefdom that village pays taxes to, and so on up to the kingdom level, then the continental level, then the planar level, then the extra planar level. So you can build outward or inward. Those are two concepts in the world building. Now, I will say that the easiest way to world build is outward, because a lot of times when you build inward, you will not want to start your games running, your sessions, until you've gotten down to that smaller detailed area where the players are. So you'll rush it, or you'll start wide, and then you'll start going in, and then you'll focus just on the tiny path that leads to where the characters are, and then you're not fully fleshing out your world. You're just fleshing out one little path, and if the characters leave that path at all, you're back into improvisational land. And now this is for people who build their own worlds, not necessarily people just using the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or Planescape or what have you as their worlds. Got to keep an eye and make sure there's nobody questioning in chat. So far, it was not. It does show we have one viewer. I don't know if that's counting mine, but I don't think so, since earlier I had 0 viewers listed, and I was still logged in on another window to keep an eye. So you never know. If somebody else is physically there, I'd love to hear from you to know you're there and that you can hear me and you're understanding what I'm saying. Because, like I said, I talk a mile a minute. I'm like a gnome tinker. I can talk your ears off and still have time for tea. Uh, but you're going into these world building things in these homebrew adventures, and which is really what I think a lot of DMs really want to do eventually is they want the total control of their world. They want to be able to introduce new things, and they want to bend and break the rules as they see fit without having to worry about a whole bunch of rules lawyers complaints about that. Now, there's going to be some rules lawyer complaints no matter what, because it's D&D, it's a game, it's got a book, the book has rules in it, so people think those rules are set in stone. They're not. The rule number 1 is in place in D&D, and in most tabletop role-playing games, it does say that every one of the rules in the book is purely advisory, and the DM should feel free to take them or leave them as they see fit for their campaign, as long as they are fair and consistent with their players. So, when you go to make a world, you need to determine first off which direction you're going to go. And like I said, the easiest way is to build outward. Start at the farmstead where all your players might have been fosterlings and best friends and go to the same schoolyard and stuff. They live in and these 3 or 4 farms and this one gypsy camp all send their children to this schoolhouse, and you all grew up together. And when you decided to go adventuring, you all decided to go as a troop. That's fine, and that's something that you can encourage as a good starting spot for your adventure. Then you go out into the wilds directly around that settlement. You decide like what kind of threats are out there for the people of the settlement. Do they typically attack along the King's Highway, or do they avoid the King's Highway because it's typically patrolled or even magically protected? Are they mostly natural beasts in the area? So maybe some larger versions like giant spiders and wargs and stuff, but you're still looking at bears and spiders and wolves and boars, and you're not necessarily looking at unicorns and chiren and chimeras. So is that how you're going to flesh out that beginning, or your newbie zone, as you would call it in a role playing video game like an MMO? Your newbie zone area. What kind of monsters are they going to fight in there? How are you going to start these guys off? Are they going to fight monsters in the local forest, or are you going to start them off with something more urbane? Are they going to have a zombie outbreak to fight, or corrupt officials to investigate within the town itself? Is it going to be more of an intrigue-based game? Which of the pillars of call them the pillars of creation, which of the pillars of the role-playing games are you going to focus in on the most? Now, we know that there's 3 pillars to every role-playing game, and that is combat, exploration, and interaction. And just to break down what we mean by those breakdowns, because they do kind of intermingle sometimes, combat encounters are the ones where you're very mechanical, you've got the dice out, it's you versus them. Those are the direct encounters you have with the bandit, with the swarm of locusts, with the, what have you, the dragon. These are the combat encounters. And in most published adventures, about 75% of the game is focused around that combat pillar. There's no fault in that. It's done that way because these are the beginning adventures when you're trying to bring especially newer players in, get to know their characters, and it's the most mechanical part of the game, so it's the easiest to run and control. And the less improv is involved in this more mechanical aspect of the game, which is why as the game editions got newer and newer for Dungeons and Dragons, they became more and more combat balance between the various players, because they wanted everybody to be able to participate in this very key pillar. This is the part that draws the kids in that want to play. If you want to get a kid involved in a game, you got to teach it how to blow stuff up. That's pretty much how it works. Uh, they're going to want to swing their swords at bad guys. They're going to want to feel that accomplishment of defeating the enemies. And so that means that you have to provide that to them. And that's the part of the game that they're looking forward to. And it's the part of the game that the majority of established gameplay is centered around. Just popping around to make sure nothing shows me that I've got anybody else listening. Still says I've got one viewer. I still don't know if that's me, but we're going to keep going as if it's not. Like I said, people can always go to YouTube in a week to 10 days, check out this video as I export it over there, and see what's going on. But yeah, that's the encounter of the combat, not the encounter pillar. We don't call it encounter pillar, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But it's the combat pillar of the game. Next, we have the interaction pillar. Now, the interaction pillar is the role play pillar. This is when you do a lot of the role playing. This is when you take on the character persona of your character and you speak as your character. And you listen to the NPCs as the DM speaks as those characters. And he's describing the environment and everything and talking about all the conversations you have and the backstabbing and the intrigue and the diplomacy and all that. That is the interactive one. It's when you're trying to communicate with another creature in a non-combat setting, and maybe there's a language barrier. That's an interaction encounter. And that is where my one point is coming up. Encounter. You can have encounters in all three pillars, which is why I don't call the combat pillar the encounter pillar like some people are wont to do. Anything can be an encounter, and so you got to be prepared for that. Now, then there's the exploration pillar. That's the travel pillar. A lot of people hand wave that, especially longer journeys. They say okay, and then a few days later you arrive at. They might run one or two encounters in the wild just to keep your blood flowing and to show you that the wilds are still the wilds, but most of the travel time is hand waved and forgotten about, and that's perfectly fine. But there's so much of richness that you can find in the exploration. If you really want to, you can turn the exploration into being the majority of your campaign quite easily. A lot of the great myths in mythology didn't just involve like epic battles and stuff. Sure, when they took on the labyrinth, which would be an exploration encounter, they're exploring a giant maze. They did include the Minotaur in the labyrinth as your eventual combat opponent. But I think most people can agree that the labyrinth itself was about 75% of that story, and the actual time with the Minotaur is, only 20 to 25% of the story. So it's the reverse of what they normally do in a lot of the pre-published modules and adventures. You're focusing in on the environment and environmental encounters. Again, I use the word encounter because it can have a lot of the same aspects of an encounter. Are things like hazards, traps, mazes, strange interactive landscapes like null magic zones, or having to take a side quest through the astral or ethereal plane. These are the travel encounters. These are the exploration parts. Your whole job may be to map a new continent. It's not to go out there and fight everything, but it's just to give an adequate map of survey before they try to take that unkingdomized continent for themselves, because it's all wildland. So it's not about conquering as much as it's about surveying it and seeing where they want to put any outpost to make it viable for people to live. And so there's exploration is a big part of it. Now, and I've used the term encounters all the way through. And if you have listened to my breakdown of the CR system and building encounters, you'll know that's because, to me, an encounter, what makes an encounter by the standards of D&D. I mean, encounter means you do something with your environment or people or things within the environment. But in D&D terms, an encounter means that there's a potential to use up resources. If you look in the DMG under encounters, it'll generally tell you that an adventuring day is meant to be 6 to 8 encounters. Now, they mainly mean like combat encounters, but they can be other encounters. And you can go higher than 6 to 8 when you start counting these other encounters. And that's between long rests. Your combat encounters only last, 30 seconds to a minute most of the time. Somebody behind me. Yeah, they only last for 30 seconds to a minute most of the time. And so if you can only do one 8-hour long rest in a 24-hour period, that leaves you 16 hours to fill out. Keep hearing something behind me. Anyway, but you can fill these, but there's longer encounters, which are the non-combat encounters, like exploration encounters, like dealing with traps and puzzles, hazards, interacting with NPCs. Those are all things that can fill out your day as well. And if they have the potential to use up a resource, then they truly are counted as an encounter for the day too. Because really, when it comes down to it, what makes an encounter easy, medium, hard, or deadly isn't necessarily always the combat aspect of the encounter. I mean, sure and deadly it is, but it's also in how much it uses up your available resources. Hit points being one of your resources. Now, sure, you can get hit points back through various healing methods, but those healing methods themselves are a limited resource. So you're just trading one resource for another. Sorry, I'm still kind of nibbling at dinner. And so those are resources. How many spell slots you have in a day is a resource. Now, sure, the warlock refreshes their spells on the short rest, so in an hour they can get theirs back. But they only have like 2. So you're still looking at, is it worth it sometimes to short rest all the time just to get those 2 resources back from the warlock, or should he have held on to them a little bit? Those are the considerations you got to make as you go throughout your day. You have to decide if it's worthwhile to use a resource now or save it for later. Spell slots. You can use spell slots, for instance, in an interaction encounter. You could use a charm person spell instead of using your charisma and your persuasion ability or intimidation ability to get information out of somebody. You can use a charm spell or a command spell or something of that nature to basically override the non-magical ways of doing an encounter. But those are going to use up spell slots. Now, for most your characters, you're not going to get those spell slots back till you do a long rest. So that means every resource you use is one more resource you won't have if you go on to that big bad evil guy, the BBEG encounter that might be at the end of the day. And it might not be in the end of the day. You never know. Well, you don't never know. Sometimes you do know. But quite often you don't know when you're going to come into those bigger battles, those hard and mini boss battles that are going to really strip you. Because how I look at encounters, easy encounters use next to no resources. They have the potential to use maybe 1 or 2 resources, but usually less than 10%. Um, medium encounters can use 20 to 50% of your resources. So those are the ones that are quote unquote the even battle between you and your opponents. There would be using the straight CR system and the straight character class system, 3 to 5 characters of, say, 5th level can go against 1 CR5 threat. And so that's what they call a medium encounter. But that's 20 to 50% of your resources. Then you go on to the hard encounters. Now, hard encounters can be 50 to about 75% of your resources. These are the ones that really suck you dry. You can't really handle a couple of them back to back. You usually want even at least a short rest between these encounters so that the warlock can possibly get a couple of his spells back. And anybody who does have short rest, refresh things, try to get them back between these encounters, because these are the ones that really sap you of a lot of your options. It's really what a resource is an option. And so that's it. Now, other resources are not directly involved with your characters, are things like vitality potions and healing potions that make it to where you can do better midday. If you don't have a chance to rest, they can take the place of a rest. You could have a magic item that when you activate it, it counts as having got a long rest. That would be a DM item, not something on the player handbook or the monster manual. But that could be a potential item that the DM created for some of these slugfests to kind of give you a reset partway through. And then you have like healing potions. They give you back your hit points, but don't use up your spell slots. But they do use your disposable potions. They don't come back. Potions are consumables. They're one-shots. So it is still another resource. It's just not always a resource taken into account necessarily when they were building the CR system. So it's a little bit of an extra resource. And that's the thing. In 5th edition, they didn't take into account having certain default magic items or even mundane items. Each of those forethought items, if you can have them, really make you effectively fight at a slightly better standpoint, effectively go forward in a slightly better standpoint than a person of the average level for that average challenge. So you take and you use up these resources. Now, a hard encounter, like I said, 50 to 75%. Then you have what's called the deadly encounter, or what I like to call the boss or mini boss encounter, to kind of relate to those people who have played a lot of video games and MMOs out there. We all know what a boss is. The boss is King Koopa at the end of the Mario series, or the boss is like the massive alien threat at the end of Metroid that fills the whole screen with alien monsters to come at it, or something of that nature. The boss is a bad situation because it can use any up to and more than 100% of your resources, and by 100% or more, that means that you could die or be captured, because captured is sometimes an option instead of death, alternatively, depending on the type of enemy or situation when you're running. Or you could be falling down with exhaustion if you were in a non-quote-unquote threatening position, but you did use up all of your resources, really. If you're running around and all you are at the end of the day is a sack of hit points with nothing else, barely with the strength to lift your sword up to make another swing, you've got 4 levels of exhaustion on your characters and so on. Yeah, it's time to get some rest in and stuff, since you've used up all of your resources, and sometimes more than all your resources. Like I said, you could have used up those limited use potions that are supposed to last you all month, been used up all day in one day. So the boss encounters are the ones that can do that, and that's about 5% of your encounters. For combat breakdown anyway, if you use the standard kind of breakdown, it's 5% easy, or I'm sorry, 15% easy, 50 medium, 30% hard, but that 30% is split into two subsets, and then 5% deadly. And the subsets for the hard, in my opinion, first is your standard hard encounter. It just can use up to 75% of your resources. Its challenge rating equivalent is usually 2 to 3 levels higher than the party's average. If you're using like a really balanced challenge rating type system, uh, in that's that. The other 15% are the tricky encounters, and tricky encounters means that they may be next to impossible unless you learn the trick of the encounter. Like, for instance, you're fighting a bunch of lycanthropes, and you're all melee characters, you're not magic characters. Until you figure out that you need to pull out the silver weapons, that encounter is deadly because they're going to heal from everything you do. Or say you're fighting a troll and nobody knows how to stop the troll's regeneration. Nobody's got chill touch, so they can't stop healing that way. And they don't know what nullifies the troll's regeneration. And it could be different than what you're expecting because the DM does have caveat to go in and change things, especially to keep people from metagaming by just looking them up in the book. So until you figure out the weakness of that troll, the troll is an impossible encounter because you pretty much can't hurt it, or it's just going to keep coming back for more until you come up with something to stop its regeneration. So 15%, half of the dangerous, not dangerous, but hard encounters are more tricky. There might be a special item in the room or a piece of the environment that you have to learn to use in order to finalize the encounter. And so that's it. And then, like I said, the last 5% of encounters, 1 in 20, is your mini bosses and your boss encounters. These are the ones that are going to really quite often result with the party either dead or running away. You got to remember you can run away. There is no shame really in running away, unless you're a paladin. Sometimes there's real shame in a paladin running away. Depends on what their oaths are. But there's really no shame in it if they're of an overwhelming force. And so you have to realize that it is still a viable option. One of the things since 3rd and 4th edition came out in Dungeons & Dragons is people got to the point where they did not think that they could run away, that it wasn't a viable option. All encounters are supposed to be doable, right? Everything is supposed to be, made on a balance system, right? Wrong. Even Gary Gygax, who invented the game, never intended it to be a balanced system. He was often wanted to send dragons against first level characters. He did not have this whole balance thing on him. He tried to balance things across levels, which of course isn't fair on the players. So I still think the players need to be on an even kill. But the monsters, every monster you encounter is not automatically going to be there and set to the level of the players. As I like to say, like for instance, when I run a game and I've got, say, 10 players in my group, and that may seem like a lot, but I run 10 to 12 players all the time. When you got 8 to 10 to 12 players in your group and half the group don't show up, I don't go into the encounters that I've got planned for the day and strip them of half of their monsters. I don't do it because there's no guy at the front of the dungeon. There's no special goblin or kobold whose whole job is to be with, like the going to the shops right now with quarantine, where there's only allowed so many people in the shop at a time. There's nobody at the front door counting, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 people went in, so we're only going to send in troops 1 and 2 against them. Tell 3 and 4 they got the night off. No, that's not how it works. And especially in an open sandboxy type situation, you can come and a DM will specifically put a hard monster or challenge in the way so you don't go the wrong way. They're not necessarily railroading you, but they're greatly encouraging you not to take this path here because this is a deadly path. And that may only be meant for people of a much higher level. Like this might be a portal that skips through down to the much deeper depths of the dungeon, and it's meant for people 5 levels higher than you. You can just, tell them no admittance, or you can put something in there in their way, and they don't realize that you're blocking that off for now, and you can come back later on and take it. And that challenge could be a tough monster you got to run away from, but it also could be a locked door that you just don't have the skill to do, and you don't have the strength to break open. You know, and that's the thing, is it's not, and there's always a chance, however slim, that you can defeat that almost impossible task and push forward. And if you did, let the dice fall where they may, you're probably not going to keep that luck up forever. They're going to probably kill you. If the dragon at the door don't kill you, the dragon's mom will. So got to remember those kind of things. Now I'm going to take a quick break, and then I will be back, and then we'll see if anybody is listening. I'm going to put it on my Be Right Back screen so that you don't have to see random walking around on my cam. And I'll be back in just a little bit. Got to go use the facilities, as it were. And we'll see if people are paying attention, or if we'll go ahead and end this a little early. We've only got about 27 or so minutes left in the scheduled broadcast anyway, so I could always cut a little bit early and not worry about it. But I'm hoping to get some actual active questions, so I'll be right back. What are you talking about?
Something for tomorrow, or something for the dumpling. Some meat for the dumpling.
You don't put it in the freezer at all.
Okay, well.
Yeah, well, you feel like that. You have just told him that, and then he said, no, I'm going to do this. He's like, no, that's not what you do. No, he said he was going to leave it out of the freezer for a little bit and then put it back in later. Well, not back in the freezer. He tried to defrost.
Where do you want me to put these?
Okay, I'm back. Let's see if we've got Any more viewers? No. We've got about 14 minutes left of the broadcast. So I'll probably start wrapping things up. Once again, if you do end up watching this broadcast on YouTube, remember to regularly check my YouTube. Check out my Patreon page. Just started using it, so I'm welcoming any comments and suggestions about how I've got things set up there. I just did real basics right now. If you are a $10 a month subscriber, you'll get early access to any writings I do. They will not become available to my $5 a month subscribers until the next one in their particular series comes out. So, for instance, right now there's the prologue for my book that I'm working on. When a chapter 1 of that book comes out, then the prologue will go and become available to the $5 a month subscribers. I'm going to try to post something every month, but what I do post every month is not necessarily always going to be on the same project, so there will be some staggering. We've talked quite a bit today. Well, I've talked quite a bit today about character backstories and world building and things of that nature. Kind of went on a ramble. Haven't had any real interaction this show, but of course it's the first scheduled show in this particular series. Everything else has been unscheduled. So let's hopefully see more people here in the future. I'm going to go ahead and stop us right now about 12 minutes early. I want to thank everybody who does come by and support my channel by giving me a follow. I do need several more follows in order to get my affiliate status. I need basically 40 more followers out of 50, and I also need to bring it up to an average of 3 people in this chat room at the same time, and right now my average is 1.1. That is up actually from what it was. It was at less than 1. Earlier today, I think I had the best attendance I'd had with up to, was it was earlier today, or actually it was closer to last night's stream of Final Fantasy X. But I at that point had what was it, 5 people on at the same time. Not everybody was talking, but they were there, and so that helped out quite a bit. I'd love to see a nice show with about 15 or 20 people, all with questions I'd love to give you answers to. As far as the RPG College goes, you can find me doing panels at places like VisionCon and Game. I usually have my own table at Game called the RPG College, as well as doing at least one panel, which is the GM's Roundtable. Kind of like today, it's an open forum panel, but I do have other DMs there giving their 2 cents worth. Everybody's considered kind of equal. At my last live panel last year, I did have Keith Baker, the designer of Eberron, as he was our guest at our convention, and he came and participated in my panel as well. Couldn't get Satine Phoenix. She had a game scheduled at that time. She had a lot of stuff on her schedule. She kept herself busy, but still was wonderful to see her. But those are the people that help inspire some of the stuff I say on these things, although I've been doing this for 42 years, ever since 1978, 3.5 years after the game first released at Gen Con. I was only 7 years old when I got the game, and I've been playing ever since. One of these days, I might even get it right. And as I say every show, thank you for those of you who do come in and listen. It has shown as 1 viewer, 1 to 2 viewers throughout the show tonight. Earlier today, I was also live streaming where I was running alpha test on the Fractured MMO. And so I will continue to do that for the next few days. I have till June 1st. I'll have access. Public access will open up for that Thursday, the 28th. So you can follow my links that I've left in various places for the Fractured MMO Open Monday test. And you can actually win a potential of getting a key that lets you have unlimited access to Alpha Test 3. I myself, as a backer, only have access to Beta 2, so I have to wait till Beta 2 comes out before I can get full access. But before then, I do get the occasional extra invite, like I got to go in a couple days early this week, because of the fact that I was already a backer. There's still some backer level packages called Founders Packs in the store, and at least one of those gives you full alpha access. Not to mention VIP access later on once the game goes live. So check that out. We have no actual sponsors to my show, but I would say that a big part of what brings my show to you would be Metagames Unlimited of Springfield, Missouri. They don't actually actively sponsor me, but I am one of their store DMs, and I like to help promote Dungeons and Dragons there through the store. I also want to send a shout out to Nameless City Board Games and Comics, who's another outlet for gaming people here in town. And then both the two conventions that I'm most heavily involved with in the area, which is VisionCon, where I just most recently did 2 panels at their virtual con, and the Gaming Arts Media Entertainment Expo, where I am the cross promotions director. And we're looking at doing something online this year in replacement for the live convention because of what's going on. We have not officially announced exactly what that's going to be, but we are going to do some kind of online features to thank our many supporters and give them something of game to hold them over until next year. We are already looking at our times for next year, just waiting for confirmation, and then we will be announcing those as well. We do fully intend to run our convention next year, so be looking for that. As always, I'll be involved directly with games, so a lot of my scheduled stuff goes out the window during the week of game as I'm busy prepping for the game to come out, and at other times when I'm cross promoting with other conventions, which hasn't happened this year because of quarantines, but maybe next year we'll get back on the same old schedule, and I'll see people out and about. You can always come and talk to me, and I welcome any comments, chats, requests for information, shows you'd like to see on my show, either broadcasting under my own umbrella, or if we do something on for game on an online kind of forum, something that you'd like to see game try to put on, or me to put on for game, you can let me know. Now, I don't have the names of it right now, but a couple of my other game officers have their own Twitch channel things going on. Greg Pullman is doing a lot of retro board game, card game, and video game broadcasting. And Philip Landergan and his friend Angel are doing a nerd podcast that includes a lot of video game streaming, both new and retro. So check those out, and I will sometimes be doing reviews of board and card games or role-playing games for their podcast, so you might see a snippet of me there as well. Thank you so much for coming in. I've actually killed more of our time, so we only really stop in about 5 minutes early, but I'll go ahead and give you a relief from my voice for now. Thank everybody. I'm going to go ahead and change the stream over to a raid of some other channel that they appreciate their topic, And that's how I like to end things, so that you don't have to necessarily get right offline. You're just not necessarily going to be seeing me no more. But anybody that is watching my channel can come over to a raid with my redirect, or if you log into my channel before they log off, you'll see their content. Thank you so much. Let's see what raid channels we have available right now. We have a Final Fantasy X 10.2 HD walkthrough kind of channel going on. So let's go ahead and start a raid there. Looks like they got like 5 people viewing.
And we have all the previous episodes of our show up on our YouTube channel as well.
Of course, that's also where Kelly and I post new videos every Thursday at youtube.com/Dungeon Dudes. We cover everything Dungeons and Dragons, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next time with more Untold Tales of Drakkenheim.
the wall of the gate and one of the hedges that's right there to hide and ready an attack if anything hostile comes through.
Perfect. You can go ahead and roll me a stealth check.
30.
Cool. So you blow past because you're coming at a different angle, Rysar and the others, and you wedge yourself in between the gate and the hedge. You see Zephyri kind of give you a confused look over her shoulder as you step in, and you can feel now the vibrations, the heavy footfalls of the half-giant with each strike against the ground coming closer and closer as you ready your blade. Is there anything else on your turn, or do you want to pass it to somebody else?
I will pass the turn to Cronkle.
Does he know of you?
Caesar, during all of this, if you crane your head up,
Yep.
it's harder to see him now as it's gotten darker and darker, but there's another crackle of lightning. And in that moment, you see, the small figure of Caesar 100 feet in the air, exactly where he was before.
Okay. So they don't know. I guess he's going to. And we haven't seen this yet.
At this point, the three of you can see the shape of the half-giant Rolf storming towards the gates, swinging the club back and forth.